How are we doing? Day 2. Looking alive? I feel like they send the most enthusiastic ones to MC, just to get things what's the word? English is my second language, so revving up again? Revved up again, okay. We don't have too much time in between transitions, so I'm just gonna make this pretty quick. Our next panel is gonna be on the state of DePIN with Chris Hyman from 1KX Moderating. All right, round of applause. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't think I'm moderating, but
That's okay. So thank you for joining the panel on State of DePIN. So my name is Arth Patel. I'll be moderating this session. I'm the co-founder and president of Lightnode Ventures. We're a Web3 advisory and consulting firm based out of New York. Thank you guys for joining us. I'll let the panel introduce themselves.
Yeah, my name is Prashant, and I've been building into the infra space for close to around 5 years now in Web3 alone. And my whole focus and passion is around like making the programmable compute more and more easily accessible to the end users. So that's what we are kind of working on at Spheron. Thank you.
I'm Lacey Wisdom. I'm a GP at Protocol VC. So we spun out of Protocol Labs, have been investing since 2017. Protocol Labs is, of course, the creator of IPFS, libp2p, and Filecoin. We invest broadly in the Web3 ecosystem with a focus on backing breakthroughs in computing. And we've made several DePIN investments, over 15 at this point. So very excited about this panel.
yeah, hi, I'm Christopher, not the moderator. I used to be an entrepreneur myself. I used to work as a CTO in startups. Through a couple of lucky coincidences, got in touch early with the technology, Bitcoin and Ethereum. But only in 2017 actually made the jump into the space. Together with my co-founder from back then, his name is Lasse, we then started our own fund in 2018. And being former founders, we always had we raised money ourselves from other founders, from other investors. And they were actually pretty decent investors, but we always felt like they could have had a much bigger impact on our success than they've actually had. When we got offered the opportunity to launch our own fund, we said, okay, the number one thing that we want to do is we want to always try to maximize the impact we can have on a founder success. I think we've done a pretty solid job so far, on building up this culture at 1KX. We're now at 25 people, and we are investing across the whole industry, I would say. DePIN is one of the first really exciting things that we started out investing in 2017, 18. Also super happy to be here.
Thank you. So I want to start with the basics. So how do each of you, would you define DePIN, and what industries do you see the most use cases or the most potential in?
Okay, I can take it. Before, I think the term DePIN was only coined in 2022 or something like that. And before that, we were actually internally calling them hardware resource coordination networks. Horrible word. It doesn't sound as cool as DePIN, but I think it's actually a little bit more accurate because for us it's more about it's a business model innovation, right? Similar to how Uber, for example, right, disrupted the taxi industry by just outsourcing the driving to a lot of other drivers, and therefore it created a lot more value in the whole taxi segment. I think the same thing is going to happen to DePIN, right? And that's, in a sense, it's not necessarily a major technological breakthrough, even though there's really really cool technology built. For us, it's mainly a business model innovation. That's, I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of roughly how we are defining it.
Yeah, I think today a lot of people think of DePIN networks as these decentralized, physical infrastructure networks that are leveraging crypto incentives to help power everything. I'm also from the school of before there was a term for DePIN, so I think in our book we were always looking at things like IoT. I don't know if anyone even still uses that term anymore, but first it was IoT, and then when Protocol Labs launched the Filecoin network, the term DePIN didn't really exist. It was probably the second DePIN network in all of Web3. And we just basically saw we're aggregating all of this compute power. I think that physical infrastructure is still very important to DePIN, but I see it kind of changing over the next few years as it becomes more hardware agnostic.
Yeah, so for me, I think when it was not quite DePIN, I was also building the same ecosystem. But for me, as understanding how I basically look at as a founder in the entire space, that it gives me as a founder an leverage, an opportunity to go ahead and raise a capital, not a capital as such from the public, but raise a capital as in hardware as a capital openly in the market and allow community to participate into that. Just imagine like at Spheron, when we never imagined we were able to like raise at least $60 million worth of compute from the market just by launching a network, right? It was so crazy to kind of look at. So it really given me an understanding that if we combine the right level of hardware infrastructure and along with the right level of incentive on the layer, I can speak more about incentive later, but right tech connected with the right crypto payment infrastructure just opens up a new opportunity for, as what Chris also just told, is like a new opportunity, a business model where everyone from the community can participate and everyone from community can also pay back to the same community as well. So that's how I look at DePIN.
Got it. So I want to actually build on what you said, Prashant, regarding incentives. So like DePIN is revolutionizing ownership and incentives regarding structure. But for some long-term value, what could we do or see in the DePIN space that can move it away from just the token incentives and financial incentives involved and make it more of like real-world long-term value?
Yeah. I think, we've been really good in DePIN and building up the supply side on things, and we've often neglected the actual demand side. And so I think part of the reason it's been so easy to build up supply is that like crypto degens are really good at like gamifying things, like getting people really excited to kind of ape into the networks. But then that leaves this void like post TGE when people basically no longer have incentives of like, oh, you're going to get the airdrop, and they basically leave the network. And then that like leads to all these like other kind of domino effects where people are like, oh, the network's dead, and it's like kind of a fire sale, right? So I think we need to focus a little bit more on like building up that demand before, launching the token and like before it becomes basically very open market.
Yeah, I mean, I would even go like one step further and saying like, if you're launching a DePIN network in 2025 and you don't have like, I don't know, let's say at least like 1 million in ARR lined up in demand, like don't even bother. So yeah, I think like the demand side is super, super critical. I mean, unfortunately, the market can stay like a lot longer irrational, that we can stay solvent as investors, right? So, and so far, right, the market has been really like rewarding, just like massive oversupply, right? I mean, you've seen all of like the projects, that claim they have like hundreds of thousands of GPUs on their network. Okay, but who's using them? Like their utilization is literally at 0. And so like all of these GPUs, they're just a cost on your token holders. But still, like token holders, just bought more. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think there needs to be kind of like some major shift in how the market operates, but it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I'll cover more on that one. I think I do agree on both of your side. And that's why when we started building Spheron, the one thing which we kept in mind is like build first and build not just first supply side, build both demand and supply. And it's also chicken and egg problem a lot of times in DePIN also is like what you want to go first. I'll tell you a very classic example and you can go on my Twitter and check it out also. Few weeks back I tweeted that we are out of supply because we were running out of the GPUs in our network, literally it happened. And then we realized, okay, so now if we come back again, roll back on the same question is that, do we really solve the supply problem first or demand problem first? It depends, like how we are kind of looking at. Now, I think what Chris has also mentioned that understanding the business model is very important here and how you're going to drive that demand on those compute which you are aggregating. And that's what we kind of stood forward and we said like, we challenged that entire, the status around the DePIN concept around GPU utilization that build, and because a lot of these DePINs which you see today are foundationally flawed in a lot of ways. The reason because if I ask you simply just go and lease out a GPU today, I can bet like you will struggle a lot. And that's what we solved, right? The first thing which we solved was like allow users to seamlessly, easily access the GPUs without even any question asked. And being a Web3 like native, transaction-enabled systems. The second thing which we solved was that is how we can connect these systems to the upcoming demand, which is going to be AI agentic demand. And that's when we started building, is like talking to a lot of these agentic frameworks, started supplying them. For example, we recently onboarded a team which is building Flame. They're building the agentic infrastructure. We just onboarded a team called Excel, huge shout out them. They are building this DeFi strategy structures. They are utilizing our infrastructure to basically power their side. So that's where I kind of look at. I think incentive, I don't really believe in incentive in crypto. Honestly, I believe in is that you should not sell an incentive, and that's one of the things which we have done at Spheron very from day zero. We have never ever went ahead and even today, most of the people who have been farming Spheron's stuff, they were like all the points and all of those things went to zero. The reason being because if they are not performing the jobs, they don't get anything from us. So and the other thing is like, yes, incentive is there. We want to give them an ownership, but we want to give that ownership to the people like who are very active, performing the job, doing the task, and then being active in the entire community.
That makes sense. So now I want to actually ask a question to Lacey. So you've been vocal about the rise of DeSci. And like, what do you see, what role do you see, especially in the overlap between DeSci and DePIN, especially with the decentralized infrastructure, and like how that overlap and what it will do for decentralized science, obviously?
Yeah, I think, so what I've noticed with some DePIN projects is that like not all of them actually need specialized hardware, but specialized hardware is like a really easy way to boost revenues. But I feel like in DeSci, many more projects do have this requirement for specialized hardware to collect the scientific data. And so an example is we're investors in a company called WeatherXM that's collecting weather data. And so they need something that's like very specialized to collect that. I talked to a company recently in our network called Causality Network that's working on building these bioreactors that are basically helping to solve a lot of the fraud that exists in scientific data today, where you can basically have on-chain verifications proving that this data hasn't been doctored, which I also think is super exciting. So yeah, I think there's a really natural fit for DePIN and DeSci, and obviously DeSci is a very kind of new sector, kind of becoming a little bit of a buzzword, but I do think that there is some utility there.
That makes sense. So obviously the goal is mainstream adoption. So currently, as we move towards this ownership model and kind of decentralizing all of this, what do you see as a major hurdle, or what do you see as the accelerant to get to this mainstream adoption, whether it's technological, more regulatory, or is it more of like an economical thing?
Yeah, I think, so in many ways, there could be two different kind of streams in terms of adoption for DeSci. So one is like, I think we're still pretty far from like actually getting, like pharma, as an example, is like a heavily regulated industry. So we're pretty far from actually getting to that level of adoption. But I think that often, as we've seen with like other apps, like even outside of Web3, if enough people actually adopt the technology and start using it, then like regulators have to pay attention to you and then have to come down and actually determine some sort of ruling. So I think the natural kind of first step for DeSci adoption is just having more people participate in like different kind of bio-DAOs that are occurring. So like, you know, I've talked to people working on like diabetes DAO or like rare disease DAOs, and I think these are a lot of people that are left out on the fringes of society and who like aren't necessarily getting catered to by big pharma, whose incentives are more kind of aligned with, you know, just creating the most high ROI drug for something. So I think that's the first step, is just kind of like grassroots engagement. And then there's something else that's going to come after that, which is more adoption from probably like independent, you know, like hospitals and like scientific research centers, and then it will kind of spiral from there.
Chris, Prashant, do you have any input on kind of the mainstream adoptions and kind of pitfalls, or currently what hurdles they're dealing with?
I mean, for DePIN specifically, I think we just need a lot more founders from Web2 coming into the space, you know, that already have a lot of like distribution, that are able to like really, that will see, okay, we need to abstract crypto like completely away from like the enterprise customer or like the end user. And that way, right, you know, like we can just kind of like offer them, you know, like the major economics, like the major like improved usability, and they don't even know they're using crypto. That's a little bit, I think, what we are like mostly lacking. Regulatory, I can't really speak. I think, you know, like legitimacy was definitely like a problem over the past couple of years. I hope that's changing now with like, you know, some new people in charge. But let's see. I think so far, like really UX has been like a really big issue, right?
Yeah, I think Chris just talked about UX like the last. That was I was supposed to be like speaking about. So essentially is like the biggest challenge in DePIN is two again. The one is UX, of course, and the UX is basically is a problem of foundational issues. It's never a problem of like how the things are designed. UX is always the foundation thing. If foundation is good, UX is always going to be good and clean. So we are already solving at Sphere on ensuring that that happens. And also there are a lot of other projects who are like working around the same to solve that foundational issue to make the UX better. The second is, and I go a little bit opposite in the direction of like enterprise adoption and all of those things. The reason because I've been talking to like before even we started jumping into the building into this space, the first thing which I did was like got on a call with Intel folks, got on a call with Sony folks, got on a call with some couple of more service industry like who are the main stream adoption for all of these things. One thing they have asked me that, do you guys like, are you guys planning to get a GDPR license or SOC2 compliant or HIPAA compliant for these? I said like, we can, but the moment you go into that direction, you are essentially building a Web2 product. It's not a Web3 anymore. I do love abstraction, I do love all of those things, but for me, it's like the way I'm looking at is like, what is the biggest moat at Web3? The biggest moat is the full autonomy around the transaction execution and the full autonomy on the payment rails. And that's where I'm looking at is like, and agentic framework, which we see today, has the biggest moat which Web3 DePIN space can leverage up to, because those things are just like open for, and one of the best use case which we have ever seen, so I have ever seen so far. So I'm looking forward for those kind of like adoption bottleneck to be kind of kicked out. And once that happens, then we'll see like our focus is like, let's adopt first in Web3, and then we'll think Web2 next.
Got it. And I mean, we have members from two prolific DePIN investors and also a founder of a DePIN. So I want to take the conversation a little bit on the investment side quickly. When you're looking, this is for Chris and Lacey more. If you're looking at a DePIN project, like what kind of metrics or what do you see very quickly that would kind of excite you about the project, very high level? And then obviously, Prashant, congrats on the recent strategic round, but like what are you working towards that you feel that has given you the most positive feedback from these conversations from the investment side?
So you guys want to take first?
Okay, yeah, I can. I mean, I think I've alluded to it, like in my previous responses. I think what we are mainly looking for is a Web2 founder that already has traction in what they're doing. They might not be like the number one in their market. They might also not be like the number 2 or 3 in their market, right? But they are like in the market, you know, and they're having customers, you know, like, and you know, they're like able to retain their customers. But in order for them to win that market, they just don't have enough capital to kind of, you know, like incentivize, you know, like more supply and so on. And so for these types of founders, right, you know, like if they start embracing DePIN, like this new business model, basically like what I'm calling it, right? Then they're like able to kind of like massively like, you know, cut their capital expenditure and their operational expenditure. And therefore, you know, like they're able to like really like undercut the competitors in the market. That is like something that I'm looking for because yeah, then that way we can bring just a lot of new value on chain that is currently captured elsewhere.
Yeah, I think echoing what Chris said, to a certain extent, we're kind of looking for the founders' right to win in the DePIN market, and we're kind of looking for the fact that they have a go-to-market plan and have some kind of inroads into the right kind of industry leaders for the industry that they're trying to disrupt. But I think another thing that we like really kind of focus on and like really hone in on is like, does this project, by existing in the DePIN space, does it actually help it scale faster and better than a Web 2 counterpart might? And I think that is something that's also kind of, you know, let us invest in some things that might seem like, oh, you know, there's some like other Web 2 companies, but we believe that now, because this is decentralized, it can scale with like less capital than its Web 2 counterpart.
No, that's great for that insight. So I see we're kind of closing in on time. So I wanted to take this conversation, kind of zoom out. Imagine if we were having this conversation in, let's say, 4 or 5 years. What would you want to see in this space? And particularly, like, what kind of milestones would you wish was achieved to kind of see the mass adoption of DePIN across the industry?
I mean, for me, I think it's just number one is like utilization, right? If we are looking across all of the networks right now, utilization rates of like all of the hardware are like extremely low. And yeah, that is kind of like a function of, right, massive oversupply in the beginning, but also, like a lack of, like really like paying attention towards demand. And so, yeah, I would want that we're seeing a lot more utilization, really like close to like 100%, that we are like able to utilize resources on the same machine, like let's say, like a storage network plus, like a compute or GPU network running like on the same machine, right? And we are like utilizing all of these resources to like a maximum effect. If you ask me like what I wish for is that, we're capturing like 20, 30% of like the global cloud market. That's what I would be hoping for.
Yeah, I think not to sound super bearish, but DePIN right now is actually really small when you put it in the context of like all the devices in the world. I think I saw something like there's maybe like 10 million devices that are like running DePIN nodes right now, but in the world there's like 50 billion devices, right? So that means that we currently have less than like 0.1% market share. So like in the next 5 years, I definitely want to see like that number increase, like maybe to the hundreds of millions, maybe to 1 billion, right? And then I think the other thing that would be really great is like kind of piggybacking off what Chris said is like seeing not just like higher utilization, but also just seeing that like the incentives have changed so that like people aren't incentivized to just like offer supply that's not being used, which I think is a really huge problem today.
For me, on the compute side, what I'm looking at is like, I look as a word as an entire data center. So I want everyone to contribute their computing power so that we can capture that. And just a fun fact is like 1% of this entire computing power which we have in our houses, if we contribute that, we'll outbeat AWS in terms of the numbers around the compute capacity. So not 5 years, of course, but at least there should be some part of it, that supply which I want to capture, which is free and easy to kind of bring it forward. The second thing is, again, the UX and the utilization angle. UX, because that's very, very important, and I want to go into the place where I want to see like most of the Web3 companies utilizing the Web3 infrastructure, and the UX is like it has to be just smooth and sleek.
Got it. No, so I want to thank each and one of you for your time. It was definitely great for insightful panel. So we have about 1 minute. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Guess no question? Okay, we have one question. Go ahead.
As a non-Web2 founder, I know you're looking for more Web2 companies to get into Web3 and to get into the DePIN space, but as somebody who might be looking to buy a bunch of hardware who's already in the Web3 space, what do you think, what hardware types are going to succeed in DePIN over the next 7 to 2 years?
I mean, like GPU, storage devices, etc. Like, I mean, these are like really easy to get access to, and therefore, like, I doubt that there's like a lot of like, that you're able to really like differentiate yourself. But we're seeing a lot of, like more exotic networks, right? Solar panels, or drone networks, or, like what she said, right? With weather data. There's a lot of, like really specialized networks being built. That may sound, like a little bit more niche right now, but if I would be going in there, then I would maybe like look into those categories, because everything else is already pretty crowded.
Okay, I think time's up, but thank you guys for your time for the panel.
Thank you.